Well, thank you, Sarah. I love being here. I kind of wish I was in person, but this is okay. I'm actually living in Boston right now. Well, I've been here for many years. I'm from the Boston area, and I'm just thrilled to be here. So, for all of you who have no idea what a gap year consultant is, I will explain quickly. You can think of me very similar to what a college counselor is. There's a process of going through the whole college process, and a college counselor will help a student do that from the beginning to the end, picking the schools, GPA, they're going to fit into a cookie cutter of what colleges make sense. As a gap year consultant, I do the same thing. There is a process. There needs to be a plan to have a really productive gap year. But to me, the cool part about what I do for a living is there's no cookie cutter. Every single gap year is different, just like every single student's different. So I really enjoy the idea of helping these students. And I will say the reason why I started Gap Year Solutions almost 10 years ago is because I really wanted to help high school students transition successfully to college or whatever other experience they may be doing. And that's really my mission. Also, as Sarah said, I am the proud mom of four boys, and I kind of joke about this, but I am 5'7", and I have these massive men in my life. I love them all. And my oldest son actually spent his junior year of high school studying abroad, and my other three sons took a gap year. So I will go into a little bit of detail towards the end of the presentation tonight to give you experiences of what they did and what their outcomes have been. So I just want to let you know right up front, my mission really is to be the interrupter of going right to college. So I'm interrupting the process of going directly to college to just consider taking a year, taking a break before you go. And the reason why I'm doing this is honestly, personally, I have this mission. I really want to get and continue to spread the awareness of gap years. I think by the end of this year, I will have had over 35 presentations just like this to help other families, counselors, school counselors, college counselors understand what the heck could this year off look like, and really why should or would it make sense for more students to really consider this. So I almost take it on as a mission. And before COVID, I was heading my body in so many different schools around the country. I do have to say, Zoom does make my travel a little bit easier. So let's get started. This is really what I want to focus on tonight. The importance of a break after high school. A lot of us are just, we're following the herd, and that's the choice that majority of the US students are going to be making. So I want to thank you for being here tonight. And thank you for listening and wanting to learn a little bit more about what that year between high school and college could really look like. And we're going to talk about why don't more students take a gap year? Why are we stuck? Why are we not choosing this? And how do you structure a gap year? I get that question all of the time, and all the different experiences that can be done in a gap year. And that's where I'll share a little bit about what my own sons have done. And then finally, how do you relate the gap year and the college planning process together? What comes first, and how do you plan that? And so I'll talk about that as well. So to start with, why could it make sense to take a break before students go to college? Why and how can we slow this down? And I almost want to say the elephant in the room, but maybe not even the elephant in the room anymore. We know the price of college. If you look at the data on the left, the last 40 years, look at the increase in colleges. It's crazy. And you look at the inflation of the daily, yearly inflation. It's not even a comparison anymore. If you think about some of the real top elite schools, we're talking 80 and $90,000 a year for college. And I also want parents and students, I'm not sure if we have any students on the call tonight, but what other investment do we make in our lives, making sure it's really the right time to make this investment? I think of a house. I think of, just other, that's probably the biggest investment. College for some families could be one of the biggest investments of their lives. So I ask you to make sure and have your student make sure, is it the right time for the investment? If this student has fire in their belly and they cannot wait to get to college, go for it. Go. Seriously. I mean, happens to many students, but it doesn't happen for every student. So just really make sure that your student has what it takes to really succeed and navigate a college campus. It's expensive. And the other option here, and the other reason why some students could really benefit from just taking some time before they go is mental health. And it's sort of the what we're talking about a lot now. And I will say this particular study, there's many questions in this study, and I chose the question about feeling depressed. Every freshman has been asked this question for the past 50 years from this particular study. The study happened to stop at 2019, but whatever the case is, it's been going, 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 and then all of a sudden, if you look at 2009, it started to take an uptick. And if we remember what's happened in 2009, that's when the iPhone came out. That's when social media happened. And guess what? It hasn't gone down. So I think of mental health is another reason why a lot of students are saying, you know what, maybe we should consider this. So let's look at this for a second. And this is not every student, okay? This is just what I'm seeing, and I want to just go through this a little bit. Is this really there are a lot of challenges for today's high school students. And it's not just mental health challenges. I almost picture a hamster wheel. And you think, students get on that hamster wheel when they're a freshman. I know that we have a freshman on the call tonight and a senior on the call. And it's almost like they get on this hamster wheel and they're on this race. They just get on it and they're on this race. And I will ask students, what is the end of the race? And some students will say college. And they've been on this hamster wheel, and they just have been trying to do everything they possibly can to get into college. And most of their high school experiences have been about getting into college. But I say, who are these kids? And not even, I mean, way before college, I think of our kids right now in the US, they are more programmed than we used to be, right? How many kids just play outside after school? I mean, I live in a street right near a middle school, and there's barely any kids outside anymore. I feel like our young, elementary, middle school kids are more programmed. There's more activities. You need to start soccer when you're in when you're 2 versus second grade. All of these activities are wonderful, but a lot of kids don't have a lot of downtime. And then you start high school, and then you hear about this whole college thing. And so a lot of students feel like they don't have any time to just start figuring out who the heck they are. And talk about like lack of time to learn to problem solve or do some of these really important life lessons. They don't have time because their coach is telling them when they have to be there, or their theater director is telling them, or their parents are telling them. They don't have the time to really decide, make decisions on their own. So I think that it turns into this stressful situation for some. Again, not all students. A lot of students don't know what it's like to cook, or to do their laundry, or to budget, or to a lot of students don't even have their driver's license, which is fine, but it's these basic life skills that they're not learning right now. And then we talk about the whole college process. As you see, I have 4 kids. I've gone through the college process with my own kids 6 times because a couple of my kids transferred. It's a big process. And so it's not just stressful for the kids, it's also stressful for the parents. And then sometimes parents are thinking, well, why isn't my student excited about college? Come on, he's a junior. Why aren't they asking me about colleges and visiting and starting to think about which colleges? Some students aren't ready. So I think that this is just sort of the idea of why not? Really, why not take this break? So in our country, there's about 4,000 colleges that are 4-year colleges, universities and colleges. And on average, up to 1 out of 3 students will not go back after freshman year. Again, this is an average number. And of all those students, only 59% of those students will ever graduate. And if I was in person, I would say unmute. And what's the normal average rate now, or how many years? It's 6 years. So this slide, every time I put this slide up, it just makes me pause. What are we doing? Like, why are our freshmen washing out? What are we doing in the US? We're just saying you need to go, right? But you don't. Like, we could push this, and I feel like literally pushing this pause button. Like, what is the rush? Why are we saying that every student, well, many students who are thinking of going to college really must do that right after high school? And if you think back 3 slides earlier, I do have 4 kids, and I can tell you right now, all 4 of those kids, they didn't sit up at the same time, they didn't roll over at the same time, they didn't talk at the same time. I didn't expect them to. They're maturing at their own time, their own rate. But some reason we're thinking that once you graduate from high school, oh, you got it all figured out. You're just going to go right. You're just going to go right off to college, and you somehow that 2 month summer period, you're going to figure out life skills. You're going to figure out what it means to pick your own classes, and you have all these independent skills. Some do, but many don't. So what can we do? What's the option? And I call this break a gap year, right? Um, and this is my definition of a gap year. It's an intentional time off from traditional academic studies to focus on personal growth and well-being. I don't even love the word gap year, but we as in the United States have accepted that. I call it a discovery year. Who the heck am I year? It's a year of personal growth. And it doesn't have to be a year. I would say the majority of students from high school to college, it will be a year. But there's more and more actually college students that are choosing to take a semester off or a year off, whether they want to just take a mental break and they're just burned out, or whether they just want to transfer to a different college, many reasons, but it doesn't have to be a full year. So let's talk about the benefits. And I would say the number one benefit, I don't even have it in a bubble because it's just too big, it'd be the whole screen, is maturity. Now we know, or many of you may know, that a teenage brain is nowhere complete. And I don't think it's complete until people are 25 or 26 right now. So it's just a year to grow, a year for your brain to grow. And I started Gap Year Solutions really to talk about life skills. What tools do you need to really be successful when you get to a college campus? You have one shot at being a freshman. And I want students to go when they feel like, I kind of got this, I have some independent living experience. I know what it's like to budget. I know some life skills. Students all the time, my own son included, will say, I can't believe that students don't know how to do laundry, my gap year students. And I'm thinking that would have been you if you hadn't maybe learned that life skill during your gap year. But just basic life skills. I think it's really, really important for students to feel confident and more independent when they get to campus. A huge one is decision making. We as parents, and again, coaches and counselors and mentors, have really made a lot of decisions for these high school students. But what about them making decisions? So when I work with a student for a gap year planning process, again, there has to be a plan. I'll talk about that 10 times over. The student is the driver. The parents are in the back seat. As much as the parent wants to go on a gap year or have a gap year, it's the student's gap year. So literally, these students, their gap year is about their interests, their goals, their budget, and they get to make the decisions. And there's a safety net there for sure. But learning to problem solve, I feel like kids nowadays, you know how they problem solve? If I had my phone here, I'd be like, they problem solve, Mr. Google problem solves for them. But what about them trying to think out of a paper bag, them trying to make decisions without going to their phones? Authenticity for me is huge. If whoever that's senior on the call tonight, and you had said that you had gotten into a few colleges, congratulations. Literally 13 years of school and you've gotten into college, that's awesome. And I say, you'll probably have a sweatshirt, maybe you've decided on the name of the school you're going to, but I will ask you and ask all the other seniors, you are more than the name of the college on your sweatshirt, whether it says Colgate or Fairfield or whatever it says. So I ask you to ask yourself, who is that kid under the sweatshirt? Because just the name of the college isn't who you are. And I think at the gap year time, as a student to finally be authentic, who do I want to start becoming? There's cliques in high school. We all know that. And there's also cliques in college. But I think of this gap year time as almost like a clean slate. You can start thinking on your own. It's pretty magical, I have to say. College focus is huge. First of all, students are not necessarily in academics. Some students can do some academics for sure. But in general, it's a time for you to start learning, but not in a classroom. All these interests that you never had a chance to even think about during high school because you've been told what you had to study, where you had to go, what classes you had to take. And colleges love gap year students. And I'll tell you why. Because they know when they get there, they're a year older. So they are a year more mature. and they've had real world learning experiences, whether it's a job, an internship, some experience, a travel, whatever they're done. They're a little bit older and they're a little bit wiser, and they tend to actually be more leaders on campus. And as far as the college is concerned, they're happy to accept them. Most schools, again, some schools don't. You have to reapply. We'll talk about that later. But the retention rate is higher with gap year students. As the slide before, 1 out of 3 kids on average may not come back after freshman year. Colleges want kids to stay, and gap year kids will stay, and they will graduate with a higher GPA because they are more motivated students. And then finally, well-being. I think it's huge right now to understand, and I like the fact that students are trying to understand more about their well-being, emotional, physical, and mental well-being. And I actually just made another slide on that because I think we need to talk about that for a minute. I love the fact that more students are so open to talk about this. A lot of students have, anxiety or depression or ADHD or some learning challenges, and they want to help themselves. They want to know what their triggers are. So when they go to college, they kind of have the tools to really navigate what they need. Certainly there's help on college campuses, but it's different. Students need to know what they can do during this time that maybe their mother has always helped them, or their dad, or their someone in their family has helped them figure this out. But now they get the chance to figure this out. It's really empowering for them, and I think it's really important as well. Take a break and recharge. Finally, with a plan, these kids can smile and have fun as well. I think 10 years ago, I couldn't have said the word, oh, you can have fun in your gap year, because parents would be like, no, no, nope, I want this to be this. No, now it's okay. It's okay to have fun, but you have to have a productive and purposeful plan. But so many students for 13 years have been in school, and their brains need a break. That's awesome, right? Let them have that, but make sure they're productive and they have goals. And finally, serving others. A lot of students have never gotten out of their bubble, right? Appreciate what they have and share others, whether it's in their town, their state, our country, abroad, wherever, but really understand how other people live, accepting people's gifts and challenges, and helping when you can. A lot of students are really excited and want to volunteer and share what they can with others. So there is good news here as well. So I did a survey, Gap Year Solutions did a survey, and to high schools a couple months ago, and 45% of the schools said over the past 3 years, their students are more aware of gap years, which makes me very excited, because I think there are more and more students talking about gap years and more counselors talking about gap years than ever before. COVID certainly helped that as well. So why don't more students take gap years? And I was going to unmute everybody, but I won't. Why? Why don't more students take gap years? In the United Kingdom, in Europe, in Denmark, I think it's like 70% of students take gap years. Australia, they all think that we're kind of crazy, that we basically just go right from high school to college. Where in Europe, it's more of a rite of passage. It's not like, are you going to take a gap year? If you're going to take a gap year, it's like, what are you going to do? But here we're very different still. And let's talk about that for a minute. Here are some of the reasons. Number one, it's too expensive. And that's just not the case. If you get anything out of this talk tonight, I want you to understand that everyone and anyone can afford a gap year. It's really what your budget is. I would say 95% of the students that I work with will have some sort of part-time job to actually help pay for whatever experience they're doing in their gap time. I think it's important for students to put skin in the game, and there's other ways to have affordable gap years. If they do want to travel, there's many things where they can do woofing, they can work on organic farms and work on a farm and get free room and board. There's workaways, there's work exchange. And if the student does want to do a gap year program, some of the programs also have scholarships. So don't have that be an interrupter. And I get that question a lot. I understand, again, the price of college is crazy, but that's not a reason why not to choose a gap year.
And Catherine, I just wanted to mention that somebody entered into the chat that another reason why a lot of students don't consider it is because they see their friends going to college, and that there's a sense of there's pressure. People
Yes.
feel pressure to go straight to college from high school.
Thanks, Sarah. And I love that person that said that because that's my reason coming up. So that's awesome. Um, reason number two here, just another reason is you have to travel. It's all about adventure, and I just don't want to travel, so I'm not going to take a gap year. Well, that's wrong because you don't have to travel on a gap year at all. Let's say the student in the top left there, he actually started a sneaker business when he was in high school. And for his gap year, he wanted to see if he could actually make this a viable business. And he was so excited. And he did. He was at a fair there selling his sneakers. The student on the bottom left, he chose to do 3 different internships. He just wanted to say, I don't really know what I want to study in college, so I want to do some internships. These kids both lived at home. They didn't travel. They had amazing gap years. Student on the bottom right, he did not know what he wanted to do. So he actually chose to apply to college in his gap year, which can be done as well. I do suggest going through the process as a senior in high school, but this student chose not to. He signed up for an EMT class. Halfway through the class, he said, oh my gosh, I have my aha moment. I want to go to nursing school. So he applied to 5 nursing schools, got into every nursing school, got to work part-time on the ambulance because he got certified to help pay for college. He said he's like on cloud 9 and said, if I hadn't taken a gap year, I never would have figured that out. So you can do anything on a gap year. And here we go with the FOMO. It is real. I would say it's the number one reason why students choose not to take a gap year. Again, it's real. So I want to address that right away. If a student has a plan, so when their friends are going off to college in September or August, they know what they're doing. Their plan starts the same time or even a week earlier. They have their eye on what they want to do. They've decided what they want to do. They are excited about what they want to do. And there's no regrets. They will immerse right into their plan. So I can say hands down that students now, when they go as first years, their roommates, and I get my students texting me all the time, you were right, Catherine. They are jealous or envious of, hey, dude, why did you do that? How did you figure that out? I wish I could have done that before I started freshman year. So it's almost like these students feeling like they just are so excited to share what they've done with their college friends. It basically takes courage. If you can think of yourself, can you take a step off that hamster wheel and do what feels right for you? It's a gift you're giving yourself, because if you can make that decision to not follow the herd when you're 18, just think when you're 25, 26, you don't love your job, you kind of want to make a change, you have that. You've done it before. You've already started your own path, which I think is super powerful. So I hope that sort of helped the person that asked that question. Finally, reason number 4, that's for someone else. Now, this is the same survey that I had sent out to schools a few months ago. And as you can see, 60% of the kids said, we actually think gap years are cool. They're fine. We're okay with them. But that's for somebody else. That's not for me. And I can tell you right now that someone else, every kid, I believe, could benefit from a year. These are all, just by the way, all of my slides throughout this evening tonight, they're all of my students. These kids are all different. All of their gap years were different. There's no set gap year kid. Anyone can do this. It does take some courage. You got to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And hands down, this is not a year of, let me figure this out in September, Mom. I'm gonna do a gap year. Sleep until noon, maybe looking at TikTok, maybe doing your video games. No, that's a vacation. That's nowhere near what a gap year should be. The gap year has to have a structure to it. Things change, plans change, but you need to start the gap year with some sort of plan for sure. So what can you do during a gap year? I mean, I could spend another hour talking about this. There's so many things you can do during a gap year. And we're going to start with just these bubbles. And this is just the beginning. So work and internships, service and volunteer, language and cultural immersion, travel and adventure. There's marine life, which has become super popular lately, farming, wildlife, art, culinary, music. And obviously within these buckets, there's hundreds of examples. But this is what the majority of students will just like draw from some of these examples here, and then just have an amazing experience. I want to actually talk about my 4 sons for a minute here because they're all so different. Again, my oldest son, he actually spent his junior year of high school abroad for the year. He lived with a host family. He was fluent by the holiday time. It was just an amazing experience for him. And good news is he wasn't back in the States to deal with the craziness of the stress of college applications and SATs and all of that. So he really had a wonderful experience abroad. My second son, he did your typical, the normal gap year in the sense of going right from high school to college. And when he had told me he was taking a gap year, I said, "So what are you going to do?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just going to go backpack around Europe." And I thought, okay, that's a great idea, but you have no sense and you've never traveled independently. I live 5 minutes from Harvard Square and there's a bus. And I talk about this all the time. He doesn't know the number of bus. He didn't know the number of the bus to get to Harvard Square. I'm thinking, I don't know if how safe that is for you to be traveling all around Europe and trying to figure that out. The best thing to do is to, sign up for a gap year program. They teach you how to be a safe traveler, risk protocols, safety, etiquette, language immersion, cultural immersion, visas, passports, um, dealing with an airport in a different language. But they're expensive. So again, I'm helping 4 kids go through college, and I said, you can certainly do those. And I think that's the way you need to start your gap year if that's what you want to do. But you have to pay for a lot of that. So he did. And that's him in the restaurant. He worked overtime. He probably worked 40 or 50 hours a week to help pay for that program. He paid for 2/3 of his program. He will say to this point, years later, that his gap year was a gift that keeps on giving. He never once talked about the amount of money he put into that. It changed his life. He has had it at the top of his resume. And he will say that when he was interviewing in college for internships, the first thing that the interviewer, the employer would ask him, "What'd you do in your gap year?" Everything he learned, it just changed him. He was more, employers like kids to take gap years because they're a year older when they graduate, right? So it was just a life-changing experience for him. And, he will say, "Mom, what's the rush? Why doesn't everybody do this?" I agree with that. Third kid here, he actually went to his top school. He was stuck during COVID. He was in high school. I had 2 kids in high school during COVID. Didn't have a lot of class time, but he still wanted to go in the sense of it was just 2022. Um, and he went to the smaller school and he signed up for everything he could. Every club. He was a tennis club player. He started rushing a fraternity. Second day of college, we had no idea that he was doing that. The website said second semester. Bottom line is he came home November, December, he was a wreck. He had overdone. He couldn't manage his time. He didn't do nearly as well in academics as he wanted to. He was disappointed in himself. And it was his older brother that said, "Why don't you take a break? Take a semester off, regroup, reboot, see what you can do. Maybe you go back to that school, maybe you don't." Bottom line is he took not just a semester, he ended up by taking a gap year, changed his life. He actually ironically also went to Spain, lived with 3 different host families, did an intensive language immersion program, came back, and he worked after he went on his trip. He taught himself how to play golf. He took a couple of community college classes, and he worked. He's a different kid. He's now actually just transferred to Boston College, happy as a clam. Changed his life as well. And then finally, my fourth son, another story. He was a very late bloomer. He was a rower, and junior year, he did really, really well, and he was going to be recruited for rowing. Unfortunately, senior year, December of his senior year, he got a bad injury and he was not able to row. So he ended up by going right to college. And even though his brothers had said, "What about a gap year?" He wanted no part of it. He told me about 4 days ago, and 4 days before he's supposed to go back this past January, "Mom, have you paid for tuition yet? Because I'm taking a gap semester." So I was like, "Oh, okay." And he said, "It's not the right fit school for me." I didn't really go through the real college process because he thought he was going to be recruited by, these coaches. And he said, "For me, $40,000 a semester, it's not worth it. I don't want to be there." So I thanked him for not, for saving that money for another college that may be a better fit. So right now, I have my gap year hat on, working with him. The picture I have there right now is he actually just went to a Toastmasters class last week. Public speaking is important. They don't teach public speaking in our high school and many high schools around the country. So he's standing up. I almost was shocked that he was able to do that, starting to public speak. He's actually working on a political campaign right now in our town. He has a job. He's happy. He feels relieved, and he's going to start the college process, whether he goes back to the same school or whether he reapplies. He's trying to figure that out right now. So again, lots of different experiences here. Travel, no travel. Every kid was different. But then there's many, many students that I've worked with that are doing wonderful, wonderful things. I just got this picture that curling on the top row there. A student of mine said one of her goals during her gap year was to make the junior national team. And she just texted me and she goes, Catherine, I made the team. I'm so proud of her, and she's so proud of herself. There are students that are working. The student there down on the left, she's working at a coffee shop. Many students don't know what the process is to apply for a job, to interview for a job, to follow up, to follow through, to show up on time. All of these life skills they've never had before. So now when they get to college and they have to get a job in college, they have the process down. It's, it seems easy for us as parents to understand what it's like to get a job, but not for many students. There's the idea of the gap year programs, which I went through with one of my sons, 2 mentors, 8 to 12 students. Their mentors are with you throughout your gap time, whether it's 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 6 weeks, they're all different. And they all have their own niche, whether it's marine science or cooking or conservation, permaculture, whatever it may be, they have their own niche. Some students want that because they have a cohort of students their same age. Other students want to travel more independently. There are students that want to teach English. I have students that start their own companies. There's no set activity or experience. It's a mixture of different experiences each semester to encompass, I want students to look back after their year and say, I'm so happy I did this. These 2 things I didn't love, but I learned I don't like them. I think learning what you don't like is just as important as learning what you do like in a gap year. And there's also been a big interest in gap year internships. For some people, it's the first time they've ever had a professional job. For most students, right? Dipping their toes into some experience that's could possibly be their major, could possibly be their career. I don't ever say like take a gap year internship and that's what you're going to do, but they're really wonderful to understand what it's like to be in the professional world. They're typically 8 to 12 hours a week. Typically, they're non-paid, but sometimes they are. And it's having a mentor helping you throughout that process, getting your resume filled out. What's it like to have an interview, prepping for an interview, getting a recommendation, hopefully, because you've had a nice, internship and you've done the job and you've done a good job at it, having a recommendation in your belt before you start college, having something to put on your resume. But the whole purpose is to feel like I've thought about, do I want law? Maybe I'll work at work in a law office, or maybe I'll work in PT. I had a student that's thought she'd wanted to major in PT in college, so I had an internship in a PT facility. They're really a nice way for students to start thinking about their next step, possibly. So those have become really popular. Now, how do you structure a gap year? Again, I structure it like a college year. So let's look at one of these students up here. I'm going to look at the middle student here. This student worked for a political campaign through November and then worked at Starbucks and will say to me, I had no idea that a barista, it was so hard. I thought it was so easy to be a barista, but he learned and he has more respect now for baristas. He also taught skiing to a cross-country ski place near his home. And he said he was able to put his shoulders down and just read a book or take photography classes. He just wanted to not be so structured because high school was so structured, and he knows that college will be as well. So he saved enough money on those 2 jobs to pay for all of his accommodations and all of his food when he hiked the Appalachian Trail. So when you stop and think about that for a minute, all of those life experiences, being in the real world, having jobs and doing different experiences, he was a different human when he went to college. And that's what I want to get across tonight. It's just called life experiences. You get one shot at being a freshman. I want students to feel like I got this. I'm going to be able to take advantage of what's on a college campus. I'm going to be able to join clubs. I'm going to be able to get outside my dorm room and not stay on Fortnite or playing video games with my roommate, but I'm going to start going out on campus, talking to my professors, being able to go to office hours, all of the things that cost, $80,000, $90,000. Yeah, I'm going to be able to take advantage of that. I think that's the question that I want kids to really start asking themselves. As far as how did the gap year with college applications, how does that go with the gap year planning? College applications, obviously senior year, the first semester is really big with that. Some students will start their applications the summer prior, which is probably a nice idea, but they're going to start submitting them in September, and then they'll find out their deadline by May 1st. So there's early decision, there's regular decision, ED2, lots of information there. We don't need to get involved with that tonight, but The May 1st is the big deadline date that students have to make their decision whether they're going to accept or not. And then as far as the gap year research planning, I start talking about gap years, for freshman year for students, and I'm glad there's a freshman on the call tonight. Just it's an idea. You could possibly do it. You don't have to do it, but the fact that you're here to explore it, I think, is wonderful. And then the idea of helping this plan. Now, I start with working with students whenever they want, sometimes junior year of high school, because they're excited. They want to have that carrot at the end of all their studying. And other students, I appreciate this, they want to get their college applications done. I say work as hard as you can on those college applications, push go in the last one, and then the fun begins. With that said, brainstorming throughout the college process in the first semester is great for a senior. Again, there's a deferral process that every college is different. So whether you defer March 1st, June 1st, July 1st, make sure that the college that you apply to actually accepts deferrals. Some schools don't. You can always reapply in your gap year. Making sure that your plan for the first semester is complete before you graduate. It's such a weight off a student's shoulder. It takes a lot of courage anyway to choose a gap year. And for me, I want these students to be excited that they chose what they're doing and they have their eye on what they're going to be doing. And then they have the whole summer to really be with their friends, do what they normally do in the summer, or some students start their gap year in the summer. There's no set gap year. And I hope that you understand that point that every single gap year is different. But having it start while you're the same time that your friends are going off to college, I think is a really good idea. So I get this question all the time. So let me tell you, what do I do? What does a gap year consultant do? And I answer a lot of questions. This is, again, the student's interests, their goals, their budget. I talk directly with the student and also the parents to start with 100%. I want to know what's okay and what's not okay, making sure everything's on the table before beginning with the student. I help them. Again, I don't do this, but I help them create a plan. Whether it's what other activities it could be, whether it's programs, whether it's classes they want to take, whatever that may be, help them create a plan, which is what a gap year consultant does. And then vet programs. I spend a lot of my time trying to go on site visits. If I can't get on every single site visit, which I can't, I thoroughly enjoy site visits. Vetting these programs. I know the directors of the gap year programs. I have a very, very long list of standards that for me, safety is number one. And making sure that, I send my own sons in a program, I would send a student on a program. But I think safety and mental health are top of my list when working with students. And finally, I serve as a coach. I hadn't thought of myself that way, but probably about 5 years ago, a student said, Katherine, you're like my coach. And I like that. I like being the kids' coach. I don't just place a student in a program if they want a program. I'm with them throughout the year. I am that credible person that's an adult, that's not their parent. And I think that's probably why parents enjoy that as well, because sometimes 18-year-olds don't want to hear from their parents again. They might be a little sick of them. I don't know. As far as Gap Year Solutions, we also offer internship placements in the United States. I don't offer the placements I have the programs that I can offer for placements abroad, but we do very customized placements in the United States. Any state, any type of internship a student's looking for, we help place them and also mentor them throughout that internship. So that is the end of my presentation, but I will say that I do have lots and lots of resources on my website. So go to the resource library if you have any questions. I actually update and I'm constantly putting articles on and data. I like to do data and do surveys. So this resource library is a good place to land if you're interested in learning more about gap years. And I actually publish my own content a lot. So I like to blog. I like to write about gap years. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid at this point. Having 3 of my boys take gap years, I see the results. I see that I just want other families and students to understand that we spend a lot of time finding the right college, for sure. We have to. When we think about how much that we're spending on their college, find the right college, but ask yourself, is it the right time? Because if you have the right fit college, right? And it's the right time that your student feels ready to go. And I feel like I have more confidence. I feel like I'm really going to be able to take advantage of this college and what it offers. That's the right version. That's the best outcome, right? The right fit school, the right time. That's voila. That's really the best fit.